Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is your boy CIZZY back at it again with another episode of the Voices of Value podcast. And as I tell you every single week, I'm coming back with another fire guest. I've done it yet again. It is Friday on the day that you're listening to the podcast, but it is Tuesday on the day that we're recording this. So regardless of when, where, who, what hour, what day, who you're with, what car you're in, and wherever you're at right now, I hope you enjoy the conversation with me and Nathan Roberts today. Nathan Roberts has been a guest of the show once before in November of 2021. So it's been about 16 months since our last conversation. I'm sure a lot of things have changed in his life and his business and what he's focused on. So today we're going to kind of get an update on Nathan's life. And with that being said, go ahead and say what's up to the people, my guy.
Hey, what's going on? Some months back in November 2021, I was primarily focused on like multifamily investment sales and doing some retail and office leasing. Pretty much a general commercial real estate agent, meaning I pretty much just work on all things. Now I've kind of narrowed down my niche and focusing strictly on medical and office real estate at this point.
I love it. I love it, man. And that kind of takes us right into our first question of the day, man, because we want to jump right into the business aspect of this. It's been, you know, over 15 months since our last conversation. So when we think about the last 24 months, what has evolved? What has transitioned? What is new in the business life, the community, or I say community, commercial real estate life of Nathan Roberts? You just shared one aspect, which is the transition from general commercial real estate into your niche, which is medical. You said medical offices, medical and what offices? Sorry.
Medical and office real estate. So primarily the office sector, medical office is like a subsector of that industry. But when it comes to medical office, I would say the biggest differences would just be pretty much the end user. So any tenant coming in, it's going to be physician or like dental based.
And these are these typically like medical groups coming in, or is this like typically like solo entrepreneurs who are doctors who are just starting their own practice and they're looking for their first space? Like what has been your like typical run in when it comes to clients?
Yeah. So it hasn't been like healthcare systems or anything like that. Like the largest ones would be like HCA, Advent Health, things like that. These would be small physician-owned offices. So someone that may have a dental office or someone that's focused on pediatric care, things like that. I would say there's definitely a shift in the industry when it comes to physicians moving more towards the healthcare-based systems due to so many aspects. I would say probably the number one thing would just be the administrative burden. When college students are coming out and they're looking to place their license somewhere, typically they're going to place it with a healthcare system just because there's a lot more efficiencies there. There's like very competitive payment or salary structures. So all of that gets a little bit different when it comes to healthcare systems compared to physician-owned practices.
So it makes me kind of want to ask, like you went to UMKC, you were very active from a networking perspective with the community of UMKC students. I know you were definitely involved in real estate early on while you were still a student, but I do want to know, like, did you ever engage with, build relationships with any of the medical students at UMKC, and have you re-engaged any of those conversations now that you're in this like niche industry of medical offices? Like, are you like trying to hit up some of your old UMKC counterparts and be like, hey, I saw that you finished your medical degree. I was just wondering if you're looking for a space, or is that not part of it? Like, I guess, that's a fun question, but to be more direct, what's your strategy when it comes to, lead generation, trying to get an idea of who's looking for space and who your end client will be and how to like start a conversation with them? What does that look like?
Yeah. To answer your first question, um, at most universities, you're going to have different departments of school. So I was in a Black business school that was strictly for business students. So there wasn't really much cross collaboration with any of the medical medical students there. But I would say that's just a matter of what professional or what student-led organizations were you in. I was in two fraternities, so I was in a social and a professional fraternity. Professional one that was strictly business. The social one, we did have a few aspiring doctors in there. Now I still have that communication with them, just building that relationship. But a lot of them are probably, like I said, are probably going to go towards a healthcare system. So I probably wouldn't be working directly with them. I'd be working with someone that's part of, most likely part of like a board of directors for like Advent Health or one of those huge conglomerate companies there. But when it comes to lead generation, we have a few platforms for that. So CoStar, that's essentially like the commercial MLS. Now there's like you can look at like lease expiration dates and things like that on there. And typically what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll do a SIC search. So SIC, that's a industry code for each industry. So for physicians in particular, that's going to be the code 8011. So I'll put that in there and it will literally showcase all of the leases that are expiring in the next couple of years for physician offices. So I'll download like a CSV file for that. And then that's when I start prospecting, cold calling them, do a lot of door-to-door knocking. So going in, if I have a property that's nearby, then I'll print out brochures, go to the office, talk to the physicians. And typically they're 9 times out of 10, they're going to be busy, which means you're just leaving a brochure or you're trying to figure out some way to contact them directly. When it comes to cold calling and calling any business or company, there's gatekeepers. So there's going to be the office manager. There's going to be that first reception person that answers the phone. And typically, if they realize it's a sales call, you're not going to get through to the person you want anyway, that decision maker. So we use a platform called Reonomy, which is great. That allows me to search up any property and then also see who the tenants are within that building. A lot of the times for these business owners, that's going to include like personal cell phone numbers, home addresses, things like that. So a lot of the times I'm contacting these doctors directly. So I'll call them, leave a voicemail. And if I don't get through to them, then I just follow up with a text, let them know, hey, I have some office space nearby. Was curious what your office plans are moving forward.
I love that. And you said Reonomy. Can you spell that and like talk about that, or plug that platform up for other future commercial real estate agents who might be new in the space and haven't heard of this platform? So quick value add to this podcast. Can you spell that for them and tell them, is that a website? Is that an app or?
It is, yeah. It's a website. They also have an app for on your phone. Reonomy is spelled REONOMY. So Reonomy is essentially like an online database for you to search up any commercial property. So that includes pretty much 5 units and above. They do have duplexes on that, which is a good thing. So small multifamily going down to duplexes and up, and then commercial real estate in general. That would encompass office, retail, industrial, hospitality, specialty asset classes like storage, things like that. So it's essentially just an online database that allows you to type in. You can search any property. You can just do a general search for office within a geographic area. It's very broad, but the biggest thing is to get contact information for that ownership group so you can actually reach out to them and provide value.
And what does that conversation normally look like? Say you do get a hold of somebody. Do you have some type of cold call script that you use as a commercial real estate agent that you might have pulled from somebody else that you look up to? Or is it just you just eyes closed calling and just you already know what you're going to say just off the top of your head? Like, what does that conversation normally look like if they do pick up? And like, how do you lead that conversation towards a meetup in person, or coming to show them a property, or figuring out if you even have a product that they're looking to invest in for their future of their business? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah. So with any sales type of position, obviously there's like conversion rate. So I would say out of let's just say 10 people you call, you're probably going to get through to only two, which means that eight of them, you're just leaving voicemails and just following up with them. The biggest thing, that's the way that you actually establish a relationship, is just follow up. That's the number one thing. And just trying to provide value. So seeing what their needs are, if they're looking to renew their lease within the next few years, trying to provide value that way. A lot of the times, business owners don't realize what concessions they can get by either working with the tenant rep, which is free of charge to them. As far as commissions, they're getting free representation, and the landlord's paying all commissions. So they really don't lose out on anything. At the end of the day, I'm coming in, I'm helping them put together a concessions or a competitive package to relay over to the landlord and letting them know, hey, my client, who is the tenant in your building, would like to renew their lease, but there's a few other options out on the market. What can we do to try to get some of these concessions increased, just so they don't have to relocate to another property? And the three concessions you're typically going to ask for is going to be either some sort of reduced rent or base rent, free rent, or some sort of tenant improvement allowance. Now, if it's a physician and the office is already built out, typically we're going to go for either some sort of free rent period or reduced base rent. Normally,
And what does
when it's
that
the
mean?
first
Sorry.
time that, yeah. So
What does that
base
mean?
rent
Yeah.
Yeah, so base rent is the rent that's being quoted when you go to any website, or if you were to look it up on LoopNet or something like that, it may say, let's just say, for example, $12 per square foot. That doesn't include any tenant improvements or money that the landlord's given you to build out the space. Typically, they may include some TI allowance in the base rent, and then anything above that allowance just gets amortized. So that gets spread out over the term of the lease. So, for example, let's just say, for example, let's just say a medical office tenant wants to move into a space for let's just say a 5-year term, but they're also wanting like $250,000 to build out the space. Number one, it has to pencil out for the landlord, because if you're only doing a 5-year term and they're not getting any of their money, they're not essentially getting any return on the money for the next 2 years, it's probably not a deal that they're going to want to do. Now, for a $250,000 TI package, you may include $20 per square foot in the base rent, and then anything above that amount is being spread out over the lease term. So typically for $250,000, you're not going to do a 5-year lease. We'll negotiate, go back and forth, and probably sign a 10-year lease, which means the landlord's payback period might be 1 or 2 years before they even start making money, because they had that huge outlay of cost for construction at the very start of the lease.
How important is it to like make sure it's a win-win situation from a concessions perspective? I know you're working for the client who's, renting out the space, but I assume that you have to consider the landlord's desires and wants as well as you have that conversation. So like, I guess, how do you approach a deal or a relationship with the landlord and the client, making sure both people are happy and both people win, so you can kind of, I guess, prolong the healthiness of that relationship, later down the line, bringing more clients to that landlord, and that landlord hooking you up with good deals, but making sure he's still getting his money or her money. Like, how do you approach making sure both your client and the landlord are satisfied in the deal, so that you're not like, souring anybody's mouths, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say one benefit that I have is that I do tenant and I do landlord representation. So I pretty much know what landlords are looking for. Landlords, what they're looking for is to give the least amount of concessions and to try to have the highest lease value possible, which means that if they're giving less concessions, that means that they're making more money throughout the term of the lease. Now, when it comes to tenants that you're representing or business owners, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to reducing whatever the base rent that they're paying over the term of that lease. And that comes through concessions. Typically, what I like to do is put together a quick lease analysis or a negotiation chronology. So with every negotiating strategy for getting certain concessions, I can at least showcase how much money I'm saving my tenant over the term of that lease. So if we're getting a few months of free rent, let's just say they're signing a 5-year deal, and we're getting 1 month of free rent per year of lease term, so 5 months of free rent, the value of that would be essentially what the monthly rent would be times 5. That's what I've been able to reduce your expenses over the term of that lease. And then when it comes to concessions, typically, like I said, there's going to be a certain amount of concessions that are included in the base rent as far as that tenant improvement allowance goes, and anything above that is going to be amortized. So the landlord per se isn't really making much money on that, but there is, when something's being amortized, obviously there's three inputs there. You have the term of whatever it's being amortized over. So if it's a 5-year lease, it's being amortized over 5 years. What is the payment? So are you paying that every month, or you pay that every year? So being paid every month for the next five years, or 60 months total. You also have an interest rate that you need to put in there as well, because you have to look at the time value of money, right? If instead of putting $250,000 out there to allow a tenant to build out a space, you have to look at, if I had that $250,000 today and I could put that into the stock market and make a 7% return, you need to put that, at least that number needs to be in the interest rate part, because that's what's being amortized. So you need to account for that on the landlord and tenant rep side.
I love it. I love it. Thank you
So
for
I,
sharing
I, I
that.
wish I could share my screen to pull up this spreadsheet. That just includes like a breakdown of what the base rent is, what concessions that we're asking for, and then it's pretty much a chronology. So as we go back and forth, I can at least showcase to my client, hey, the landlord is negotiating with this. This is how much your base rent, or this is how much you're going to be paying with that response that we just got back from the landlord. And honestly, it is kind of hard to find that middle ground. But at the end of the day, I mean, landlords are looking at what is their payback period. So if it's a 5-year term, typically most landlords aren't going to want their payback period to be over a year and a half. And the primary reason behind that is because if their payback period was 2 or 3 years, in reality, they're spending more money than they're actually getting back as a return over the term of that lease. So typically, I would say for 5 years, you're looking at probably a year or a year and a half for a payback period if concessions are being provided, like TI or a tenant improvement allowance. If it's a 10-year term, then you're probably looking at 2 to 3 years.
Love it. I
Like
love it.
what
Go ahead.
And
Go
I
ahead.
can actually use a great example. I'm representing TNC Community. They're the largest nonprofit, or they're the most capitalized nonprofit in Independence, Missouri. I helped them find a 12,000 square feet space. Now we're getting total renovations is about $480,000. My client's coming out of pocket $200,000 to build out the space, but then we're also getting a $300,000 tenant improvement allowance from the landlord. $150,000 is included in the base rent, which is about $11.15 per square foot. So that's being included in the base rent. That remaining $150,000 is what's being amortized. So that means that my client's base rent stays the same, but the rent that they're paying is actually going to be more because they're paying back some of that construction cost too over the term of that lease.
And that right there, what you just shared right there, kind of leads me into the question I wanted to ask you next, which is what projects or transactions have come through over the past few months, or that you're working on right now. Just have you really excited? Have you really excited, and that you've been enjoying working on, or that you're looking forward to working on, and why? As much as you can share. Obviously, I know some of these deals might be private and not be able to share, but what are you excited to work on? What transactions, what deals are flowing through right now that really get you excited?
Okay. Yeah. So TNC Community, I'm very excited about that just because it's a nonprofit that has a great cause. They're focused on working with individuals with like cerebral palsy. So individuals in wheelchair, so everything in the suite has to be wheelchair or ADA accessible. So that's a project that I'm really excited about, just knowing that the term of the lease is 10 years. And it's also just me helping out this nonprofit. Like I said, it's the largest one in Independence. A few other projects that I'm excited about, and this is actually a proposal project. So this is a development off of 63rd in Prospect. This is going to be like a large mixed use development. I'm super excited about this. They should be breaking ground sometime this spring. And then they should have like a 50,000 square feet medical office built sometime next. It's going to be probably the second or third quarter of next year. But that's a super exciting project that I'm working on, just knowing that it's the first like new development that I'm being a part of, just with leasing up some of the vacant suites there. But then there's also some synergy between HCA, which is right across the street, and possibly having some of their ancillary services being located within this building as well.
I love that. I love that.
Another small thing that I'm working on. This is before we got on this podcast, but the portfolio of 5 duplexes. I'm excited to get that over the finish line. Now, multifamily isn't really my bread and butter. That's not something that I focus on. But this is a client. This is a guy that I've built a relationship for. I've known him for like the past 5-6 years at this point. Met him through the Urban Lane Institute. We were part of this Ekin Johnson's mentorship program. This was a program I was in at like 19 years old, so I was one of the youngest people in there. And that's how I built this relationship with him. I'm excited to just get that over the finish line because there's been some nuances going back and forth, especially with renovations and when those are going to be complete prior to the close date with a new buyer coming in and acquiring that portfolio. So I'm super excited about that. But I would say out of all my transactions right now, it's a lot of working with small mom and pop type of businesses to help them find some office space. So typically that's been in the private offices, so around 150 square feet, all the way up to about 2,500 square feet of office space.
I love
An
it.
office market, and you might ask some questions about this, but I can tell you a little bit about office demand and where we're at right now in this cycle.
Yeah, I kind of want to ask you with the Super Bowl, the World Cup, the NFL draft, the hype around the Kansas City's a women's professional soccer team that's growing out here. Like there's just so much energy and attention coming towards Kansas City. Is there anything like that you can visually or tangibly or just bring to mind or that you see in the day-to-day that is changing or like is being impacted because of all this energy and excitement around Kansas City growing as a top tier Midwest city? I mean, shouldn't be long, give us another 15 years, we might catch up to Chicago. So like, have you seen any impact on your business or just anything exciting or interesting coming through your laptop or your emails just because of the impact of Patrick Mahomes, the impact of the World Cup coming here, the impact of the NFL draft this summer or this spring? So just share anything that comes to mind when you think about all the excitement and energy around Kansas City right now and how that's affecting the commercial real estate industry.
Yeah, I would say directly right now, I haven't really seen that impact on the commercial real estate side. Now, if you were to ask anyone part of the Economic Development Council or anyone that's focused on bringing new corporations or businesses to the Missouri side or to Kansas City, they would probably say the number one project that's going to have a huge impact on economic development is the new airport. Now, when it comes to large Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them don't have headquarters offices in the central business district. The main reason why is because of transportation between their employees or large executives coming in. With our previous airport, we couldn't get certain planes here. Like now with the new terminal, we have access to all these different other markets because larger planes can actually land here in Kansas City. So I would say that's probably something that's going to be forecasted for the next 5 to 10 years, just seeing how the airport impacts companies wanting to relocate or at least open up like a second headquarters office here in Kansas City.
I love that. I love that. And you did just mention, the state of, in 2020, in 2023, the state of the commercial real estate industry, specifically in your niche for sure. But please break down just like where you feel like the industry's at right now. Is it in a good place? Is it in a bad place? Like
Yeah.
new people that are coming into the commercial real estate space as agents or representatives or sales reps or whatever term we want to use. What should they be looking at? What should they be studying? Should they still pursue a career in this space, or should they go somewhere else? Like,
Yeah.
talk about the state of the industry right now.
Yes, so I would say overall the state of the industry is kind of hit and miss depending on what property type you're looking at. I would say the bread and butter just the past couple of years for sure has been industrial real estate and multifamily. Multifamily, that's been hot. I mean, probably the past 5, 7 years. Ever since 2015, I mean, multifamily across the U.S. has been crazy hot. Industrial, I've definitely seen an increase in activity just across the board. And I don't personally work on industrial, but just with some of my colleagues and industry colleagues, I would say since like 2019, 2020, there's been a huge demand in out of state investors wanting to acquire industrial property. So either small warehousing or small like light manufacturing, that's definitely been a huge thing. Or flex office. So flex office would be a combination of office and then having like a warehouse component to that. So that would focus primarily on professionals involved in let's just say the construction industry. So plumbers, things like that. They're going to need some sort of facility to store all of their equipment, and they also need a front office for incoming calls and things like that to handle the administrative work. When it comes to office, that's kind of been hit or miss. Office demand, I think, in the long term is going to decrease as we see some of these companies are wanting to strictly focus on like a hybrid work model. So having employees work from home probably 2, 3 days a week, and the remaining days would be spent in the office. Right now, companies are still trying to figure out that work model. As you probably know, with a lot of the IT companies, they're requiring their employees to come back to work, and that's kind of caused a debacle between the employees and the employers. So I would say long term, what's going to shape the future of office demand will come down to companies looking at their hybrid work model. And number two would probably be just looking at the cost of officing, right? I would say that's probably, I would say out of the top three businesses or expenses that any businesses face, number one is going to be employees. Number two is going to be their real estate. Number three is probably going to be ancillary services that they offer. And if they can lower their office footprint and not be paying as much in rent or for their real estate, that definitely leads to impacting their bottom line. Most companies right now, they're focused on keeping their NOI or their net income as high as possible. And just with COVID affecting so many logistics and supply chain management, that's definitely going to have an impact in the foreseeable future too. So I would say probably flexible office, looking at the demand for that. There's definitely been an increase in flexible office or co-working space the past 2 years, just because between 2020 and 2022, there's been more startups in this 2 year span than any other 2 year span in history. So that's a great thing. That just means that more smaller companies are starting up. And a lot of them, obviously, when you start a company, you're probably going to be the one and only employee from the start, and then eventually you're going to start growing and need more office space. But I think long term the demand's going to go down, and it's going to be a heavy focus from landlords' perspectives on seeing where their property is located. Location is going to be the number one thing, and number two is going to be the amenities. So what amenities do you have inside your property compared to other properties that are available on the market right now? I mean, as you know, there's just office space that's available everywhere, all over the city. I would say the area that's most overly inundated with office or available space would be along that College Boulevard area. And really, the only way to compete is to try to either lower your base rent, how much you're charging per square foot, or to offer some sort of amenities. Now, I'm starting to see with a lot of new developments, they're trying to incorporate more things like coffee shops or fitness centers, or just increase technology with like key fob systems and things like that, or increase security with their properties, just to have some sort of amenities that they can try to incentivize their prospective tenants with.
I love that. I love that. And that makes me want to ask this question. So from a investor perspective, and then also from a agent perspective, what two, all right, let's start with like somebody in your position, right? Tenant rep or somebody just in general, regardless what side they're on, they're a commercial real estate agent, right? Whatever side they're on.
Mhm.
For an individual in that space, what is a not talked about or maybe underappreciated, underrepresented area of commercial real estate that could be like a cash cow for an agent? Like if they went and focused on that niche right now and they really locked in and put their
Mhm.
head down, they could make a shit ton of money over the next 5 years. What space would you say that is?
For me, I mean, I'm very gung ho about medical office. Obviously, like I said, industrial and multifamily has been great. I think there's going to be a huge surge in demand with flexible office. So, trying to figure out some sort of co-working component, just because there are a lot of there are a ton of small businesses out there, and if you were to offer flexibility for companies or businesses, I think you'll be able to try to get spaces leased up a lot faster. I would say, as far as the opportunity goes, if you're a commercial real estate agent, really, I mean, if you can pick up the phones and just call these businesses and just try to provide value, so just letting them know, like, ask them questions about their base rent, how much are they paying, have they looked at other properties on the market, just to provide some comparable properties to showcase, hey, I think you're paying too much in rent, or hey, you're actually below market. So honestly, I wouldn't even recommend you to try to find any other property out on the market. I think you should talk to your landlord and try to see about some sort of free rent or tenant improvement allowance. Because if your base rent is already lower than the other comparable properties on the market, there's not really much you can do there. You can't lower the base rent, especially if the base rent for the market is pretty much set based on comps. Really, the greatest opportunity is just to get out there and prospect. Like, just getting on the phones, cold calling. That's going to be your number one revenue driving source. It's cold calling, meeting, just being in front of people, being in front of business owners, being a part of professional organizations, getting your name out there, and just letting people know what you do. I mean, there's been multiple times where, I mean, I've sold an office building to a client, or not to a client, but to a buyer. I was representing the seller, and months after the that buyer would reach out to me and ask me if I do leasing too. I'm like, yes, I focus on leasing and sales strictly for medical and office. So if you can just stay front of mind for those property owners in case they have a vacant suite coming up within the next year or so, just stay in front of mind, following up with them over email, sending them texts, sending them market reports that includes information on like net absorption or vacancy rates, or what the average lease rates are going for base rent in that area is. You're at least providing value. So when they are ready to either relocate or do anything, or like I said, a landlord's looking to fill up a vacant suite, at least you provided value on what you think that space is worth per square foot.
And where do you make the margin, like in a role like yours? Like where do you make money? Because you're not an hourly employee, whereas they pay you by the hour.
Yeah.
You're not a salary. They're not paying you like base salary. So where do you make your money? Like break down the behind the scenes of like where you make your margin and where you make your cash. Like if I do this, then I get this. If I do this and this, then I get more of this. Like break that down for people out there who are
Yeah.
ignorant to the space and kind of want to know how they would make money if they got into your industry.
Yeah. So on the sell side, you make money when the property closes. So once the property gets closed, then you receive a portion of those funds. Typically, it's going to be 6%. So if you're representing a seller, you're going to charge 6%, typically around there. Now, if a buyer is coming in and they're represented by a tenant rep, then I'm splitting my 6% commission with that buyer rep, because the landlord or the seller's paying 100% of the commission. Now, when it comes to lease transactions, I get paid when the lease gets signed. So typically, Now, that would be cut and dry. That would be assuming that I was representing, let's just say I was representing the landlord to lease out one of their vacant suites. A tenant comes, they're unrepresented, and they just need space. The space is already built out, which means they don't need any TI. There's no construction. I'm getting paid once the lease gets signed. Now, if it's a scenario like with TNC Community where the lease won't even start until October, but that's 5, 6 months of building out that space. Now I'll get paid about 3% up front. So once the lease gets signed, I'm getting 3% on the front end. And then once they actually move into the space, which is the commencement date, that would be October 1st. That's when I'm getting that second half of the commission. So I make money in two ways. Actually, I would say three ways. I've charged consulting fees before where I'm just charging them $125 an hour just to consult with them on what they should be doing with their property. That may be a phone call for like an hour or two, just going over strategizing ways that they can increase occupancy within their building. So the three ways would be consulting fees, which is an hourly rate, or commissions based on selling a property, so the property actually closing, or you getting a lease executed on behalf of either the tenant or the landlord.
So in your space, prospecting, rehabs, dealing with clients on both sides, tenants, landlords, dealing with investors, dealing with the business owner themselves. You're just constantly dealing with humans, having to network, having to connect, having to close deals, having to prospect, having to be out on the road, having a cold call. So how are you finding time to balance both personal and work, and like being able to, grow in terms of your business, grow your business, make more money, help more people, but also tend to your relationships with family, tend to your relationships with the significant other, tend to your social life and being able to have friends and find joy in that? Like, how is Nathan currently balancing that right now in your mid-20s?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say it's definitely hard, but with commercial real estate, it's a lot easier than the residential side. Residential, you're pretty much working with clients that probably have a 9 to 5 job, which means you're probably showing properties or you're negotiating things around the clock. So after 5 o'clock. With commercial real estate, it is a 9 to 5 type of business. So if I have a property that's under contract, normally after 5 o'clock, there's not really much communication I can do besides updating my clients on where we're at in the process. Now, a title company and things like that, they close at 5 o'clock. So I can still send emails to them, but I'm probably not going to get a response until the following business day. But yeah, commercial real estate is a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday type of business. Now, I do some work over the weekends as far as just prospecting. So reaching out to property owners on the weekends, or commercial tenants, not really, just because normally the decision makers aren't going to be in the office on a weekend. Now, if it's like a medical office, or if it's like a medical tenant, yes, that physician's still going to be in the office because they make money when they're actually working. And typically how I get around that is I'm not going to call their office directly anyway. I'm going to call that physician directly and have that conversation that way. When it comes to landlords, it's still around the clock prospecting. And sometimes I do make calls after 5 o'clock because with these property owners, they may have a 9 to 5 job, which means they're not available during the day, but at least they have a property that they have for lease or that could be coming available. And that's just reaching out to them and staying in front of mind, honestly. So it's a lot of touch points. But when it comes to creating balance in your life, really it's kind of comes down to having like some sort of cutoff for when you're doing work. Typically, I don't answer phone calls or answer emails before 9 a.m. Now, if it's like a time of the essence type of thing with something that we need to get done this day, I'll flex that schedule a little bit. But after 7 o'clock at nighttime, I'm not answering the phones because I'm on the phones all day. And if I were to just be available to my clients whenever they're free, then at that point, it's my clients managing my time and not me managing my own schedule.
I love it. I love it. A lot of people are scared to get into real estate because primarily it's commission based, 100% commission based. You got to work, you got to go out there and hunt. So especially for your first few years and maybe even now, how have you been able to like I guess, sustain when it's a slow season? You know, if it's a slow season, are you just balancing your money really well, where when you get commission on this, you always allocate this to savings for slow seasons? Or are you, when slow season comes around, going to get a waiter job? Like, how do you like figure out how to, maintain life, especially early on in
Yeah,
the process? Obviously, there's a point where
yeah.
you develop enough business that money is constantly flowing in as
That's
long as
it's
you.
self-sustaining. Yeah.
Exactly. But prior to that,
I,
like, what's your recommendation?
I would say the first year and a half, definitely plan to not make money your first 2 years. I've been a little bit different just because I've had some mentors that were able to provide some referrals over to me from the very start. And then with a lot of listings that you get, if it's a listing that's available for lease or for sale, you get a lot of prospective tenants or a lot of prospective buyers that will reach out to you, and you can actually generate revenue from that. So, for example, if I have an office space that's available for lease, let's just say it's 1,000 square feet, and I show that to a prospective tenant who is unrepresented, and the space doesn't work for them, I try to convert them over to a client, pretty much saying, hey, if this property isn't a good fit for you, let me know. Would be happy to show other properties out on the market. So once we get like some sort of agency agreement put together with them, then that's when I'm representing them now at this point. And I'm still representing my landlord to try to find tenants. But for that tenant that's unrepresented, now I can help them find other space that's out on the market. So it's kind of a win-win. Just by having listings, you will get new business out of that. But I would say the number one thing you have to be doing every day, and this is actually something that I've struggled with, is prospecting every day. Because when you're super busy and you have all these deals that you're working on, sometimes you can get caught up in working on the deals or working in the business and not really on the business. Working on the business would be, what are the top lead generation things that are going to move your business forward in the next 6 to 9 months? And that's strictly cold calling or building relationships with people. Because at the end of the day, now I can close a large deal right now, but if I don't have anything lined up for in the next 6 months, then you're going to be in trouble, because real estate's an up and down cycle. I mean, there's times where you have a large commission that's like ten to $20,000, and there's times where you're going like a month or two without a commission. Now it's a little bit different once you're in the business for, I would say, probably 3+ years. A lot of your business from your first or second year starts to recycle. So if you got a lease done your first year, stay in contact with that tenant, because even if you represented that tenant, they eventually they're going to either want to renew their lease or they're going to want to relocate. And I get paid. You can get paid on lease renewals too. So going to that tenant and saying, hey, I've checked out other properties on the market. Obviously, I already know what rent you're paying because I helped you out with your lease in the past. Now it's time to put together a strategy on how we can get you concessions once you decide to renew your lease. And one thing I've noticed with larger tenants or tenants that require a huge tenant improvement or build out allowance is that, like I said, you have your base rent and then any build out cost that's being amortized over the lease term. Normally, landlords would try to do some sneaky stuff and keep that base. Now, the base rent will stay the same, but they will try to keep that amortization that you're paying each month as part of your base rent once you decide to renew. And that should never be the case, because if your base rent when you started that lease was, let's just say it's $12 per square foot, and then you got $2 per square foot amortized each month. So now the rent is $14. $14 is not what you're going to be paying once you decide to renew your lease, because you've already paid out that amortized tenant improvement allowance over your term. So once your term is up, now the base rent is actually starting. So now you should be starting at probably a basis higher than $12 per square foot, because you have to account for inflation, which is typically 2 to 4% each year. Now, let's just say if it was $12 per square foot 3 years ago, you may be charging, the base rent might be like $12.75 now. It's not going to be $14 as the base.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right, brother.
And
I got a
and
few.
tenants
Oh, sorry,
don't
go ahead.
and tenants yeah, I was just gonna say tenants and business owners don't realize that. Like a lot of them they're not really heavy on the math. And honestly, it's very hard to pinpoint what your amortization schedule is gonna look like, because and I'm just going to be forefront with you. A lot of commercial agents don't know how to do that. They can't put together a lease analysis and showcase, hey, if I get you these concessions, this is how much money you're saving over your lease. Now, I have a spreadsheet that I built from scratch, and that tells me essentially what the base rent is, what the gross value of that lease is. So once they decide to renew, I can pretty much say, hey, that cost, that extra $2-3 per square foot, that was being amortized. You should no longer be paying that once you decide to renew your lease. And a lot of the times, landlords, if they have an unrepresented business owner or tenant, they're going to take advantage of that.
As you can see, ladies and
It's a
gentlemen,
way that they make more money, honestly.
yeah,
So
my
like
boy Nathan knows what he's
it
doing.
makes no sense for a business. It makes no sense for a business owner to not be represented because number one, you're getting free services. Like it comes at no cost to you because the landlord's always paying my commission. Why would you not want to use a tenant rep to get concessions for your space? Why would you not want free rent? Why would you not want a tenant improvement allowance if you decide, hey, some of your space is somewhat outdated. You want glass doors or glass walls or things like that. You should be able to negotiate that, but landlords aren't going to negotiate with a tenant or a business owner because they don't understand the market or what concessions they should be offered.
And that's where you come in. Free value, free help, and you still get paid. So, like, if someone out there is listening, make sure y'all tap in with my boy Nathan Roberts. Obviously, you can tell from this episode, and if you listen to episode 1, that he knows his stuff in both the medical leasing office industry, but just in general, my boy knows his stuff. He knows the mathematics, which is really helpful when it comes to, like, profit and really like squeezing every ounce of money or savings you can get out of your situation. So definitely tap in with my boy Nathan, and how you can do that, let them know. Nathan, how can they find you? How can they do business with you? Where can they continue to support you after this episode's over?
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram tag or handle is Kansas City _office space. For my LinkedIn, just type in Nathan Roberts, commercial real estate. You'll be able to find me. There's not many commercial agents out there that are focusing strictly on medical and office. So that's kind of a niche that I wanted to focus on going forward. Medical office demand, even it's one of those recession resistant industries or property types, just because, I mean, even during a recession, people still need to go to the doctor. They still need to get annual exams. They still need to have surgeries and things like that done. Now, when it comes to office, like I said, that's kind of hit or miss. It really depends on the company. And even you can't even break it down per industry, because you can look at a certain industry and different companies will have a different reaction to the hybrid work model, or if their employees should be in the office 100% of the time or not.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love it. Recession proof, baby. Recession proof. We love that.
I wouldn't say recession proof. I would say recession
recession resistant. My bad,
yeah,
y'all. My bad. There's definitely a difference there for sure.
But so I wish one of these days I could I guess share my screen and showcase what I do day in and day out when it comes to like lease analysis or putting together a pro forma. Maybe we can brainstorm an idea one of these days where if a tenant comes in and let's just say their base rent's $12 per square foot and they're asking the landlord for a $250,000 build out allowance, how will that increase their monthly rent? So that's something I can break down.
We're gonna have to do
maybe
that.
One
I
of
love
these
that.
Days.
Hell yeah. We'll relock in via email to try to set up a day and maybe do like some type of live session. Whether we have viewers or not, we can definitely publish it and put it out there for people to tap in with at a future date whenever they want to. So I love that. We're gonna do something quick here. We're gonna do a rapid fire, which is where I ask you just a whole bunch of random questions. You give me a short and as quick an answer as possible, and then we'll wrap up with our Voices of Value final question and let the listeners get on with their day. But I appreciate the listeners for listening. Nathan, I appreciate you for tapping in and giving us the game. Let's jump into our rapid fire. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Texting or talking?
Definitely talking. It's just a lot easier to get. Like you can go back and forth 10 to 20 different texts and get that same thing done within 2 to 3 minutes over on a phone call. So I'd rather do a phone call, but if someone is busy, I will text you.
Favorite day of the week?
I would. That's a hard one. I like Mondays just because like it's the start of a new week, and it's like this thing on the back of your head. It's like, hey, if you didn't get certain things done the previous week, or you had certain struggles, and you had like a reflection for your week. Now this is a new week. It's kind of like a fresh new start to do the things that you said you were going to do that you didn't do last week.
I love it. Favorite city in the US besides the one you live in?
Oh man. Okay. So I used to live out in Reno, Nevada. Reno, Nevada is a great town or a great city to grow up in. I would. That's a hard one, just because I haven't traveled that much. Actually, I'm gonna say Oahu, Hawaii, like the
Okay, okay.
Waikiki area. That was great. Just the touristy. It's like a touristy area, and just being able to sightsee and see things that you don't normally see in the U.S. But
In the
I mean,
mid
it is the
and in
U.S.
the
But
Midwest for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Nickname your parents used to call you.
Nate, Nate.
I ain't
So
gonna lie,
Nate was
that's
twice.
kind of cute, my boy. I like that. Nate, Nate,
I,
Nate, Nate.
I still have family members that call me that, but yeah, Nate,
Oh,
Nate.
I love it. First celebrity crush.
Oh man, I would say probably Ariana Grande if that comes to mind. First celebrity crush. That's kind of a hard one. There's a lot out there. I'm gonna stick with Ariana Grande.
All right, final question. If Voldemort offered you a hug, would you accept?
I would under certain terms and conditions. So if he came like take over my soul or something like that, I would give him a hug. Why not? Everybody needs a hug or needs love at some point.
My guy, he said under certain terms and conditions. That's how you know he's a real estate professional. We love it. All right. So final question of the day, my brother. We ask everyone this question, and you were probably asked it in 2021. So I might have to go back and search what you said to this, but it's your final day on earth. You've lived to 150 years old, but your great grandkids are sitting at your feet, and it's the final words they're going to be left with from you. And they ask you, great grandpa, what's one piece of advice on how to live a good life? What are you going to tell them?
I would say just try to provide value to people because obviously monetary returns and things like that will come with the value. So just try to be honest with people. Try to be just try to establish like a relationship with people and be a good person because at the end of the day, always think that good deeds come back to you in some sort of capacity or another. So just try to be a good person and just try to live a self-fulfilling life while also providing value to the community because you need to enrich the world in in some aspect or another because without the world and them having an impact on you or your community you wouldn't be the person you are today. So honestly just giving back and being a good person.
I love it. I love it. Nathan Roberts, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you leave a 5-star review as that is the only way we can grow. And more importantly, share with a friend, share us on social, and tag us, man. We want to know who's listening, what you enjoyed about the conversation, and we really just want to interact and really genuinely be able to build a community. We're still working on it, so help us. That's the show, ladies and gentlemen.